My name is Gavin Evans, and this is another spoiler review of Arcane Season 1. And yes, I know I had a spoiler review that came out a few days ago, but while I was editing it and just wrapping it up, I'm just like, oh my goodness, I didn't talk about this character or this character. I wish I went more in depth with some of these characters, and I'm just like, I still have a lot more to say, so here we go. Also, for that other video, I tried putting in clips, and YouTube did not like that at all, which created quite the headache for me. So, lesson learned, no clips here, unfortunately. I like putting in clips because then I can put on a clip and break down why that scene worked for me, and I like the use of it. But anyways, let's begin. I love this show. I think it's the greatest show ever made. I can't stop watching it. Like, I've already watched it 5 times. I haven't watched any show more than twice. Like, this is insane. Like, it is that good, and I'm just still blown away by it. Like, every time I watch it, it still hits just as hard as it did the first time. It is some of the most emotional, brilliant storytelling I've ever witnessed, and I'm so glad it exists. But let's begin talking about some characters. Some of these characters I've already talked about, but I'll be going more in depth, beginning with Vi. Vi is an excellent character. In my other video, I talked about how much of a badass she is, how she truly loves her sister, and that's got some good qualities, but I didn't talk about what shaped her into the Vi that we know by the end, because Vandal raised her to be a leader. He even says at one point that when these kids look up to you, you don't get to be selfish. Whatever they do falls on you as well. And that's such a great line, not only because it's true, but it really shows that everything that Powder did in that moment, getting her family killed, Vi takes responsibility. She feels like that burden was placed on her. And when she leaves Powder and she ends up becoming Jinx, she feels like that's because of her as well. So she's just overwhelmed with guilt and regret. Like, her story is devastating. Like, she goes to jail for 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years, filled with guilt and regret, and the only thing that she says kept her going was the promise of seeing Powder again. And when she breaks out and she sees Powder again, she's Jinx. And the Powder she knew is gone in the past. And that also plays a lot into her perceiving time, because when she leaves, she realizes that everything is different, everyone has changed, and she's just trying to catch up, because the way that she's been held, the way that she's lived these last few years, is in a jail cell. So while everyone else moved ahead and progressed, she didn't. And I just think that makes for some very interesting character work. But let's go back to Vi and Jinx, because not only is Jinx a villain now, but she's working for Selco, the person who got Vandal killed, her sworn enemy, and her sister's working for him. Like, that is the biggest slap in the face that she could have felt. And then on top of that, Jinx's name is Jinx now. The last moment that she saw Powder, she hit her and she said, "Milo is right, you're a Jinx." And the next time she hears about her sister, it's in reference to her new name, Jinx. Like, that is some devastating stuff. But she refuses to believe that Powder is still Jinx. She blames Selco for everything. So her goal right now is to kill Selco and destroy his empire, like she said. And that's why she's so urgent, she's so aggressive with the council. She wants them to fight back. Not just because Selco's done his thing. She doesn't even talk about that once. No, she wants Selco to pay because of what she thinks that he's done to Jinx. So you can just feel the rivalry, the hatred that she has for that man. And then Jinx goes ahead and kidnaps her. And kind of like how Vi reassured Jinx that all of her insecurities and doubts were true when she called her a Jinx, Jinx goes ahead and reassures Vi of all of her insecurities and doubts. That it wasn't Selco that made Jinx. It was Vi. And that burden does fall on her. And you can just see the devastating effect it has on her. Like, she has nothing left. Like, the rest of her family is gone, and the one person that kept her going, the one thing she wanted to fight for, now has her tied to a chair. And all Jinx wants is for Vi to see her as Jinx, not as Powder. To admit that she's changed. Because, really, every time she sees Jinx, she calls her Powder. You know, she views Powder as her loving sister. The only time she actually references her as Jinx is when she's in front of the council talking about how villainous she is. Because she separates the two completely in her mind. That Jinx is this new villain and Powder is this perfect sister that she misses and wants back. She creates a division between the two in her mind, but there's not. They're the same person. And to call her Jinx is to admit Vi's war in her creation. Jinx just wants Vi to love her despite the fact that she's changed and Vi just can't do it. She can't do it. And her one last attempt to bring Powder back for good, she permanently destroyed her. So Jinx's actions at the end, Vi also feels responsible for. I just think there's so much amazing character work here on display. Like, the character's lots of depth. Haley Steinfeld plays her brilliantly. She's badass. She goes through lots of stuff. Just some amazing writing. Then we get Heimerdinger, who's an excellent character. In any other movie or show, he would be the cliche wise old man. But here, he's a brilliant subversion of the wise old man. Because him being an wise old man is both his strengths and his flaw. Because lots of what he says is rooted in truth. He is correct for lots of it. But it also creates a disconnect between him and everyone else. He doesn't perceive time the same way everyone else does. You know, there's one moment where he's talking to Jace about how he needs to put in safeguards and how it'll take 10 years, but it'll be over in the blink of an eye. And Jace is just like, we don't live like you do. We are here on a limited time. And Heimerdinger just can't comprehend that. He lacks any sort of perspective. And when he does get voted off, that moment does have a lot of weight. And I do like the fact that at the end of the season, he goes over to the Undercity and tries to gain that perspective that he misses. And I'm curious to see where they take him in later seasons, but I think he's a very well-written character, very smartly written. And in the end, he was proven to be correct. Like, the council was wiped out by that technology, kind of like he feared. But I do think it paints not just him, but Jace and Victor in interesting ways. Because Jace has a positive view of magic. His mom was saved by magic. He views magic as a wonderful blessing. While Heimerdinger has seen magic destroy cities and done devastation. And so those two's perspective of magic is vastly different from each other. And I just think seeing that on display is very interesting. And I also want to say that I love how Jace is impatient with Heimerdinger due to his lack of empathy regarding time. But Victor is the same way with Jace. See, Jace is the normal guy. He's the guy who's assuming to be living a normal life, a normal length of time. Heimerdinger lives forever. And then we got Victor who's dying. So we got this one guy who's just like, oh, we can wait. Let's just make sure we do it right. We need to take lots and lots and lots and lots of time because he's got all the time in the world. Jace is impatient with him. But kind of like how Jace is impatient with him, Victor is a dying man. He doesn't got much time left. He wants to secure his legacy. So he's impatient with Jace, which causes Victor to do some drastic actions. And just seeing how each character's perception of time really affects their actions is just some incredibly well-written stuff. Heimerdinger's voiced by Mick Reingert, and I think he does a really good job. And then we got Jace, who's voiced by Kevin Alexander, who I also think does a really good job. And I do like this character and what he goes through. I just like how he's this guy who's easily manipulated and swayed, and he just does what people want him to do. And it's not until he gains perspective and experience that he really stands his ground and becomes his own person. And I love that about him. He wants to go to war, and he puts out a checkpoint on the bridge, and when those men on the bridge die, he feels responsible. And then when he goes out again with Vi, and he accidentally kills a little boy, he feels responsible for that too. And that what causes him to change. He starts to realize the cost of everything. And I just think his character is really well written. I also say that I love in the very first episode, Echo describes him as he didn't even haggle. And Selco describes him the same way in the last episode. Just a smaller detail that I really like. I will say that I don't think he's going to die. I kind of hope he does because I don't know how he'd get out of that situation. But I'm curious to see how his character evolves in Season 2. Because I'll be shocked if he actually is dead, just being honest. And I haven't even talked about Vander yet. I can't believe I haven't talked about him at all. Like, JB Blank does a fantastic job voicing this character. And you just really gain a sense of who this person is and how people look up to him and respect him. You know, whenever anyone threatens him, the entire bar is next to him. They'll whisk him. He's this commanding father figure, not just to his kids, but to everyone. And just seeing how much he loves his kids is really nice. Like, when they come back in the first episode, he asks them, "Are you okay?" And then he gives them shit. Like, he truly does care for them. And he also has got guilt and regret over what he's done to Selco. Kind of like Vi has regret and guilt over what she did to Jinx. I just think this character's fantastic. And then we got Echo, voiced by Reed Shannon. And I love how badass this character is. But I also love how he puts on this tough guy persona because he has to. Because he's a leader. And then as soon as Vi hugs him, he starts crying. He really does miss her. And he keeps telling Vi, "Oh, Powder's gone. You need to give up on her. Powder is gone." And then when those two fight and he gains the upper hand, he sees Powder and he can't do it. You know, despite what he's been saying up until that point, he still can't do it. So some really fantastic character work. And then we get Singed, the doctor. Singed? I don't know his name really. But the doctor dude, voiced by Brett Tucker, who I thought did a really great job. This guy's not in it a lot. I like how neutral he is. He helps Victor out. He helps Selco out. He's not really good or bad. He's kind of just doing his own thing. But I love how this character, we don't see his backstory, we don't see any flashbacks, but we hear enough of him to understand how he is the way that he is. How he had this partnership with Heimerdinger, and he had this daughter that he loved so very much, and she died. And then he starts experimenting with preserving life after death, and to see if he's able to do it, because it doesn't seem like he's capable of moving on from his daughter's death. And those experiments and all that caused Heimerdinger to leave him. They caused a drift in their relationship. And at no point do they specifically state that, but all the detail is there for you to pick up on and for you to make your own assumptions off of. So I just think there's some really great writing here. And then we got Cevica, voiced by Amira Van, who I just loved this character. I loved how she's with Vandal, but she sees that he's becoming weak, that he's not taking the necessary action for the cause. So because of that, she sides with Selco, the man who would do what needs to be done. But because he adopts Jinx, she starts to see him becoming more and more soft, kind of like Vandal. So now her allegiance to him is a bit weary because she likes him, she thinks he's got great ideas and all that, but he's becoming like Vandal. And she's sensing that. So she really hates Jinx because she represents Selco's weakness. And she wants Jinx gone because of it. Like, I love that one scene where Jinx is interrogating her. I feel like we got off on the wrong arm. Maybe we should try the other. Just such a great line. But Jinx doesn't have to stab her. Cevica gives her all the information she wants because she knows it'll make Jinx mentally unstable. And that'll mess her up and cause her to implode. And I just love the fact that she wasn't just like, "I'm not going to tell." No, she told for her own nefarious reasons. And I just thought that was some really great writing. And just for the record, she was going to kill Selco at the end, but Finn just wouldn't be a good replacement, and she knows that. So, yes. And then we got Caitlyn, voiced by Katie Leong, who I think does a really great job. And I just love how she feels like she doesn't belong, that she's a misfit, and she's clearly lived a sheltered life. Like, she longs for adventure and excitement, and that's what kind of attracts her to Vi. And she also doesn't have anything worth fighting for. They made that point very clear in episode 5. And my prediction is that by the end of the season, with her mom getting killed by Jinx, that what she's fighting for is going to be revenge against Jinx. And I can't wait to see her character evolve. But yes, I think this is an excellent character. Then we got Marcus, voiced by Remy Hill. I mentioned that I love the fact that he could have been the cliche corrupt cop, but he never comes across that way. He feels like a real human struggling with the actions that he's doing. And I just love that about him. I really do think this guy's fully fleshed out. You know, whether it's the scene of him looking at the badge and throwing it on the counter mad at himself. Or even one detail I just noticed on this latest rewatch is the fact that there's a coin in episode 3 that falls into Grayson's blood, and he keeps that coin with him. Like, he really does feel guilt and regret over what he's done, and he just feels like there's no way out. He feels trapped. He's only doing this not for the money, but because he wants his daughter to be safe. Kind of like how Selco's last words revealed his real love for Jinx, Marcus's last words revealed that all of his motives were based for his daughter as well. So, yeah, great character. And speaking of Grayson, voiced by, I'm not going to be able to pronounce this properly, Cevica. I definitely mispronounced that. My apologies if you're watching, but very talented voice actor. Very talented. I think she does a great job. She's not in it much, but she has an impact. Like when you see the relationship between Marcus and Selco and how much they don't really trust each other and how they are with each other, and you see that paralleled with Grayson and Vandal, how they actually cared for each other, they cared about doing the right thing. I just think those parallels are very interesting, and I just thought this character was very well written, and yeah, I liked her for the time she was in the show. And then we got Mel, which I don't have a lot to say, but I do think she's a really well written character, voiced really well by, my apologies, Tux Orangdoy. Sorry, but she does a really good job voicing this character, and I like how she removes the ring at the end and she votes for peace. You know, it's her isolating herself from her family and their values, and she's going to do what's right. Love that. Great character. But then, okay, yes, I've already talked about Jinx plenty in my other video, but there's still some things I want to say because Jinx is, yeah, she's my favorite character ever now at this point. I just think this character is written so perfectly. I love how the very first scene of this show has Vi covering Powder's eyes as they're walking across this bridge filled with death, and she's singing that song. And then, later on in the season, we've got Jinx walking down the bridge singing that song as she just caused a bunch of deaths on the bridge. Great parallels to see how these sisters have gotten caught up in this cycle of violence, in this cycle of war, and I just think that's some really great stuff. I also love how, for some reason, I didn't notice this before, but Powder's posture really reveals a lot about her character. She's always hunched over and she always has her arms up like this. Like she's just filled with lack of confidence. If that makes any sense. But it shows, and I think that's a small detail that's really great. Also, I love how the visuals of Selco drowning are visual parallels to Powder falling out of the window, floating for a few seconds. Some great visual parallels to see these characters and what's about to happen to them. But I also love how Vi tells Powder to stay as a sign of her love. But Powder doesn't take it that way. She takes it as Vi telling her that she's weak. So Powder goes out and blows up a building, gets people killed, and Vi's furious with her and leaves her. And then maybe I'm looking too much into this, but in episode 4, Happy Progress Day, Selco's concerned about Jinx, and out of love, he tells her to stay put, to not do anything for the next few days. And Jinx is beating herself up over it. She takes it as Selco's calling her weak, when really it's a sign of his love. And you can just see how she doesn't accept love, how she always views it as a critique towards herself. So she's like, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and make him proud. I'm going to go ahead and blow up a building and get some people killed. And she does that. And at first, Selco's furious. You blew up a building, got half a dozen enforcers killed. Yeah, he's furious. But then she shows him what she got. And all of that rage goes away, and he's proud of her in that moment. And she goes over and gives him a hug, and at first, Selco is looking at the gemstone, at what she got him. And then he just puts it down and he looks at her. He really does love her, and I do love the parallels between those two things. Selco really does make Jinx feel loved and appreciated, and Jinx needs that. She needs that love and affirmation, and she could never get that from Vi. I also love the fact that she makes fun of Selco's speeches all the time. Like, I think some of the speeches did work, but she does make fun of them a lot. And I think those are some really funny moments. Like, I just think this character and everything we got in her is just some of the best writing ever. Like, she really is the best supervillain origin story we've ever experienced. And just an amazing character. Like, I've already spoken about her plenty in my other review, because there's lots to say about her, but yeah, fantastic character. And then we got the ending, and yes, I talked about the amazing emotional moment of Jinx accidentally killing Selco, and Jinx firing at the council. Great stuff. But one thing I didn't talk about is, why this ending works for me as well as it does. Not just the emotional payoff of everything that just happened, but I've been on record plenty of times that I don't like the kind of endings where we're left with the question, did they die? I don't find those kind of cliffhangers to be satisfying. Like, I've complained about the season finale of Yellowstone Season 3 a few times because I didn't find that season finale to be satisfying. So what's the difference here? A few things. First of all, the season-long question of, is Jinx going to stay Jinx or is she going to become Powder again? We get the answer to that question. They also tease a war between Piltover and Zaun. You know, we feel that tension throughout. And we do know that war is 100% happening in Season 2. There's also the question of the advancement of technology and the pros and cons. And we do get payoff to that question as well. So yes, I'm still left with the question of who lives and who dies. But that all comes secondary to the primary things that it concluded really well. So yeah, I can't wait. It's a fantastic ending. And then, also there's some things I want to comment regarding the world building that I really love. First of all, I love how Clago and Powder grabs food in the very beginning. Like when they're on the way to the apartment and when they're actually robbing the apartment. It's just a small thing that shows you just how they're left hungry all the time, which I really loved. I also love the batteries in this world. I know that's such a weird compliment, but if you look at how things work, about how the batteries go in and it starts off as green and becomes yellow and powers things through a tube, I think they do a really good job with that. I really do. And I also love how Selco is damaged because of the toxins in the water. And then later he takes Jinx out to that water and they're both in the water and he submerges her into it because the water's cleaner now. So despite how evil of a guy he is, he has done some really good things for the city, and it kind of shows in that one moment without drawing any ounce of attention towards it. I love the steampunk aesthetic to the show. I think it's really great. I love the enforcers. You know, they could have looked like cliche Stormtrooper ripoffs, but they really don't. And I love the fact that when they're down in Zaun, they have the gas masks, which gives them a unique, intimidating look to them, but it also has a bigger purpose. And I already said in my other review, but I'll quickly mention that I love how Hex Tech and Shimmer evolves. You know, there's lots of stuff going on regarding those two properties, and I think that what could have just been simple devices or chemical, they're used in so many different ways they just feel so fleshed out. It's really fantastic stuff. And that actually leads to the question of what's more powerful, Hex Tech or Shimmer? And it's pretty clearly Hex Tech. Like, Zaun is about to get their ass kicked, which I'm interested to see if they find a way to gain an upper hand, because we got the scene where Vi and Jace invade that factory, and they kicked all the ass there. And then later, Vi and Cevica fight, and they each have equipment powered by the different things, and Vi wins. So it's shown on two different occasions that Piltover was more powerful. So I'm curious about that. And speaking of who would win, when Vi and Jinx fight each other, and they will fight each other, I can't wait to see that happen. Like, I want to see that happen. Like, there's going to be so much emotional weight behind it. But who would win? And I love the fact that both of the two sisters have two very different strengths. Like, Jinx is brilliant. For goodness sakes, she figured out Hex Tech was just a box of scraps. She's brilliant. While Vi is much more hands-on. She's strong. She's a badass. She knows how to punch. She knows how to dodge. She knows how to kick. She's great at fighting. Jinx also has all these different weapons and devices. And she's got excellent aim. Like, even in episode 2, she's shown to have some, like, spot-on perfect aim. So you give her a gun and she beats her. But Vi is also with Piltover now, and she has some more powerful equipment. So that evens things out a bit. And then Vi is so good at fighting, she's number 1 for that one arcade game for the longest time. And then Jinx comes around. On her very first try, she gets number 2. And that's quite the accomplishment. Like, she gets number 2 on her first try. She beats Vi's all the other 100 times she did that machine and comes in number 2. That said, Vi was still number 1, and that was lots of years ago, and she's definitely better now. So that kind of balanced things out on a hand-to-hand level as well. But then also at the end of the season, Jinx is more powerful because she has Shimmer inside of her. So like these two girls are very evenly matched in very different ways, and I can't wait to see how that plays out in future seasons. Like I cannot wait. And one last thing I actually want to talk about in this video is a question I see popping up a lot, and the question is Selco a good father? And I've seen lots of people say yes, I've seen lots of people say no, and I don't think it's a black or white question. I think there's a lot here to discuss. That said, before I talk about it, let me just make it clear that Selco and Jinx, despite the tragic nature of the characters, and despite their best intentions, they are clearly the villains of the story. They are the bad guys in this story. Now, Jinx did end up as a severely damaged and messed up person under Selco's watch. But how much of that is actually his fault? And I'd argue none. Let's make something clear. Jinx lost her real parents. And then she goes ahead and gets her adopted father and her adopted brothers killed. All by mistake, but she is responsible. No matter what anyone else says, that is the kind of trauma you don't recover from. That is the kind of trauma that will mess someone up for the rest of their life, and there's nothing that can be done about it. And then the one person who matters most to her, the one person that she truly cares for and values and loves, then goes ahead and smacks her and calls her a Jinx. And by calling her that, she resurfaces every single insecurity and doubt she has about herself. And she leaves her. Now mind you, Vi was going to come back to her in that moment, but then she got arrested. But Jinx didn't know that. As far as Jinx knew, Vi was just like, I'm done with you, and left her for good. Like, that would mess every single person up. No doubt. And then Selco didn't kill her and chose to raise her like she was his own daughter. Because he saw himself in her. And he knew how she felt in that moment. It was how he felt at one point in time too. So the way that he got better, the way that he made himself feel better, he wants to help Jinx out the same way. By suppressing all that pain and becoming someone new entirely, his intentions are pure. And even though she does end up as a very messed up person, I'd argue that if it wasn't for Selco and his love, that she would have ended up way worse. Selco acknowledges himself that she will never be 100% okay again. But he still loves her regardless of that fact. That despite all of her imperfections, her flaws, he still loves her for who she is. And that is something that she desperately needed. And the only reason that Jinx ends up as a criminal has less to do around Selco being a father and more to do with Selco and who he is as a person. Like, if I'm being honest, I don't think Selco would have gotten her to go out on all these missions himself. But, just like how we saw it with Powder and Vi and Clago and Milo at the beginning of the show, they were going to rob an apartment and Powder always wanted to come with. So she wanted to feel included, she wanted to feel a part of something. So, replace robbing an apartment with robbing another place and shooting people if needed. Jinx would have jumped at that chance to do so. And I assume as she got older, she wanted to go on missions for her dad to make him proud. Because whenever she makes him proud, he shows her love and affirmation, and that's what she desperately needed. The only thing is that those missions just happen to be missions for the bad guys, which is a big deal, to be clear. Like, she has killed plenty of people and all that. But also the people we see her kill in the beginning are people attacking her because she's with Selco and her killing them in self-defense. Selco never lied to her. That whole speech he had on loyalty and how that kept them going during the bad times, that's all true. He really does value loyalty. And he shows it time and time again. Everyone's just like, oh, Jinx messed up. Well, you shouldn't have done this. He'll defend Jinx every opportunity he gets. You know, there's one scene where everything's going wrong and Selco's reaction is, I need to find Jinx because she brings meaning to his life. There's also another scene where he goes to a meeting and he releases that gas and people start choking and he's just so menacing. But then he goes back to his office and Jinx is there and she just beats him up and walks all over him, and it just shows how, like, in front of everyone else he's this tough, intimidating figure, but when he's with Jinx, He's soft. And his last words confirms just how much he loved her. He never would have given her to them. Not for anything. Don't cry. You're perfect. Just, oh my goodness, oh my goodness. Anytime I talk about that scene, I get a little teary-eyed because it's so emotional, but it really reveals the character and his intentions in the best possible way in just a few lines. And Jinx needs that love in her life. She needs someone to be proud of her, to lift her up, and she never got it from anyone else but Vi before. Only difference is that when the big screw-up comes, Selco doubles down on his love for her. Unlike Vi. Ideally, Vi would have raised her, but would she have done a good job at it? Impossible to say. You know, Jill did change Vi in how she perceived time, and that made her cling to the past more and more, which only pushed Jinx away more and more. You know, like, if Vi stayed with Powder in that moment and they left the docks together, yeah, I think Vi would have been really good for her, but that's also part of where Vi's guilt comes from. But Vi's attempts to get Powder back, that's all she has. That's all she can do. Otherwise, she'd be admitting that her sister is as bad as everyone says. And Silky was absolutely right. If Vi spent a day or two with her, it would only be a matter of time before she leaves her again and rejects her, because she's not this perfect version of Powder that she remembers. She's much more damaged, she's much more unstable, and she would have eventually come to reject this new Jinx. Vi would keep trying to bring the Powder that she knows back. Understandably, let's make it clear, but Jinx is too far gone for that to happen. She's just not mentally strong enough to do that anymore. You know, you just can't undo that trauma. Powder died that day. The second that Vi smacked her and called her Jinx and left her, that's the day Powder died. So to answer the question, was Selco a good father? I don't really have an answer for that. I think he raised her to the best of his abilities that a person like that could. It's just that he's the wrong type of person. Vi, at that point, wouldn't be able to raise her properly, but she was the right kind of person that she needed. So it's just a case of too little too late, which makes this story all the more tragic. A few things I want to mention before I wrap up here. I haven't mentioned it yet. I've done quite a few videos on this show, and I haven't mentioned Christian Link and Alex Yee, who are the showrunners and the writers behind this show. So if somehow, by any chance, these two people are watching this video now, like, thank you. You created one of the finest pieces of art to ever exist. An absolute masterpiece. And I'm thankful that it exists just the way it does. These two guys just did an amazing job with this show in every possible way. Like, I feel bad that I haven't given them the credit they deserve in my other videos, but it must be repeated and repeated again. Like, these two, just brilliant. Man, like, this was the first time writing anything, which is just insane to me. Your first time writing and you come up with this incredible masterpiece. Just, oh my goodness, how incredible. A few other things I want to mention is, I love how you got the cerebral section that explores advancement of technology or perception of time in bigger questions regarding human nature and legacy. But you've also got the more emotional section that's intimate and explores trauma and mental illness, regret, guilt, and questions exploring human nature and legacy on a smaller scale with big ramifications. The drama from the two cities represents the people there and their priorities. And I think that's just shown in a very unique way. I've talked about this show a lot the past few days. I don't know what else I can add. Like, I could probably talk about this show for days more. I won't, even though I really want to. Like I said, I've watched this show 5 times now. Like, that's insane. I love it. I'm completely obsessed. Like, I'm trying to watch other movies and other shows now because I can't just keep watching this on repeat, despite how much I want to. But man, it's difficult. Like, the only other story that has affected me this much is Last of Us Part 2. Nothing else has. This is just some of the best TV making and best writing I've ever experienced. Just everything about it, the characters, the story, the world building, the animation, the soundtrack, the style, just everything is perfection. You can feel the love and passion put into this show, every single frame, and it's just, I'm so thankful it exists. I really am. I needed something like this now. I really did. So I'm glad this show exists. It's truly a masterpiece. It's truly a perfect season of television. And even though I have my worries about season 2, I can't wait. So, yes. Yes. But okay, what's your favorite scene in Arcane Season 1? Let me know in the comments down below. Make sure you like, make sure you comment, make sure you subscribe. Stay tuned for some more videos soon. And Gavin,